We will get going. Host or got it. So somebody is recording it. All right. Okay. Well, my name's Gary R. Allen, and I own and operate the SWELL Wolf Education Centre, and that's part of the Tundra Speak Society that we have. You may be able to see just to the right of me, over my right shoulder, there's a wolf there. That's Tundra. Tundra has passed away on June 5th of 2022. She was 15 years and almost 3 months. And I took her around to schools for about 14 and a half years of her life. And her and I did wolf education for schools and community groups and that. So to give you an idea, we did over 300 school visits in that period of time, and she saw over 40,000 students and teachers and many other people in the community events and things like that. So Tundra was so beautiful, majestic. When she passed away, I couldn't bury her or cremate her, so I had made arrangements to have her made into a full mount, which is right there. So anyway, that's Tundra, and you can see that on our website, tundraspeaks.com. Okay, so coastal wolves. Notice I call them coastal wolves and not sea wolves. Sea wolves, that name has already been taken. In First Nations folklore, it's the orca is the sea wolf. Very similar. One lives in a pod, one lives in a pack. They cooperatively hunt and cooperatively look after each other. So I prefer to call it coastal wolves, even though, you hear sea wolves, and of course Netflix did their series The Island of the Sea Wolves, but it's really not accurate. The coastal wolf is a more accurate term, so we'll call them coastal wolves. And that now, you get questions as to, and I've see stuff that says that they're their own subspecies, which is again not accurate. In terms of talking to the people, the taxonomists, they're the ones that classify the wolves and that. In North America, it's the gray wolf, which is not the color. Canis lupus is the biological name, and then there's 5 subspecies of the gray wolf. And so for the one in BC, it's Canis lupus nubilis, and the coastal wolf is a evolutionary significant unit within that subspecies. And so what is it? Evolutionary significant unit? Well, that's what the biologists refer to it as, and that's really what it's doing, is saying that there's some really unique features of that particular wolf grouping within that subspecies. And so for the coastal wolf, it would be the habitat in which they live in, and then also what they eat. And so we know that they have a more of a marine diet than any of the other wolves, and that's obvious. You're in the middle of BC, you're not going to be eating a marine diet. So it's interesting that the scientists didn't really know about the coastal wolf until the early 90s. Rain Coast Conservation Foundation went up there. A couple of their scientists, Dr. Paul Paquette and Dr. Chris Darramont, and they wanted to study the wolves. And it was interesting. They wanted to get the indigenous knowledge of the wolves, because it's mainly indigenous communities that live on the coast or Vancouver Island on the West Coast. So they said to this Helsik member, the Helsik people around Bella, and they said, we come up here, we wanted to study the wolves. And he said, well, which ones do you want to study? And they kind of looked at him and said, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, there's the coastal wolf and there's the inland wolf. And the First Nations people would have known that for many, many years, and that generations and that. So that was the first thing that was sort of enlightening to them. And so they said, well, we'd like to study the coastal wolf and that. So that's what they did. And they did a study from about 2000 to 2010, and you should be able to find it on the Raincoast Conservation website. It's about the only real in-depth study that's been done on these wolves. They're not really well studied and that, but that study is available for you to read and that. So we know that really the coastal wolf, the territory is really from just south of Prince Rupert all the way down the coast of BC, what we refer to as the Great Barrier Rainforest, and then on the west coast of Vancouver Island all the way down to about Ucluelet. So again, what's the population number? It's really hard to determine. I haven't seen any really good numbers. My guess, and I qualify it as a guess, on Vancouver Island, there's probably about maybe 75 to 80 coastal wolves out of the roughly about 350 population of wolves on Vancouver Island.
Into the Zoom.
Sorry? Everybody still hear me? Yeah, okay. And so the on the coast or through the Great Barrier Rainforest, again, population very hard to determine just because it's such a remote area, and they're very hard to to be able to census, count in that. So they tend to be smaller than the inland wolves, and their coat is different, as you can probably see on some of the pictures. They almost had like a reddish tinge, and the belief is that that's possibly because of the marine-based diet that they have. So they're smaller because there isn't the food source there that's going to be able to make them into big wolves. And so hello, can somebody mute themselves there? Where you have really big wolves is you need two things: big prey like elk and moose, or and lots of them. So anyway, they're not the coastal wolf is not as big as its inland cousin. Now, one of the things that's interesting is they're a distinct, genetically, they're very distinct. And the reason being is, if you look at their territory, to the west is the Pacific Ocean. So you have no migration of any wolves coming from the west. From the east would be the interior, wolves and that. Now it's, you got the coast mountains all the way up there, and that's a real barrier for the wolves from the interior to come down to the coast and to mate with the coastal wolves. There's a few river valleys that that could be accomplished. So when they were doing their wolf study, they collected wolf scat, and they also collected the hair that got caught on trees and that. And so they didn't want to trap them and put the the GPS collars on them. They wanted it to be as least invasive as possible. So when they sent this, all this, wolf scat and hares and that down to UCLA for a geneticist there to study it, well, she was really quite intrigued, because what she saw was the purity of the genes that the coastal wolves had, and they weren't mating with the interior wolves. So, from her history of studying other genes from other wolves, particularly in the interior, and that, you have, even some of the genes from that would be Arctic wolves, that have been passed down from the south into these other wolves. So really what you had is, she was really quite impressed at the fact that these coastal wolves are really genetically quite distinct and pure. And so that's an interesting observation. So how large are these individual pack territories of these coastal wolves? Well, again, not much study on them, just because it's a very remote area, and it's very hard to see them. You're generally going to see them on the beaches or river estuaries and that. Now, for some people who want to learn more about them and that, here's a book called The Last Wild Wolves by Ian McAllister. And there's a number of lovely pictures. Ian spent 20 plus years photographing these wolves. He lived on Denny Island, and he would spend 2 days up in a blind in a tree getting pictures of the wolves and that. So one of the things that's interesting about these territories, they don't have to be really large territories. Wolf territories are generally determined by the amount of prey that's available. So if there's not a lot of prey, such as in the Arctic, the territories could be 10,000 square miles. And that on the coast, where you'll have salmon spawning streams and the food on the coast, such as a whale that dies and beaches itself, or a sea lion, there could be lots of food. And then there's all the other marine food, like crabs and mussels and other organisms like that. So the territories don't necessarily have to be that big, as long as there's enough food in that territory to support them. And so I'll show you a picture of, they call her three legs. She's the one in the middle. And if you are able to see it, you can see that her back left leg is actually broken. It was probably hit by a deer. Now, if that was a wolf in the interior that got hit and broke a leg, they would die. They can't keep up with the pack as it moves further, more and more in its territory. So that tells me, when I see that, that tells me that their territory is not that big, and there's a pretty good, plentiful amount of food that's available. She looks after the pups in the yearlings. She would still be able to hunt a salmon out of the streams. She would be able to feast off of a beached whale or sea lion or big animals like that. So it's sort of similar to the Pacific Northwest coast natives that their territories weren't as big as the plains natives because they didn't have to move that much with like the migrating buffalo and whatever. We also know that they're great swimmers. So let me show you a picture of. There you can see the wolf swimming there. And they can, I read that, they're anywhere from 8 to 13 kilometers they swim between the islands. So they're incredibly strong swimmers. Wolves are really, really smart. So what they do is, if they're going to swim between the islands, which encompasses their territory, they're not going to swim when the tide's coming against them or the current. They're going to go with the tide or the current, and that makes it easier. Now, they can withstand that water temperature, because that ocean doesn't really, there's maybe a 2 to 3 degrees Celsius difference between summer and winter. So they're able to withstand that temperature. Now, when they're out there, as you can see from that one that was swimming, they're vulnerable. They've been known, people have been known to come up alongside, them in boats and to shoot them. Now that's illegal. You're not allowed to hunt on a boat, but who's around? The nearest conservation officer is probably 300 miles away. So when they do swim between the islands, they are a bit vulnerable. My sense is that they're probably swimming at nighttime. Again, they're highly intelligent. They're going to know that there's going to be less boat traffic out there and less, risk to them. So when I mentioned about the hunting, the regulation is that you can kill 3 wolves a year up there. Now, given that it's really a remote area and that the grizzly bear hunt is now illegal, so there's less and less hunters going up there. Certainly there's local hunters and that, but anybody that's from other provinces and outside of Canada, they have to have a guide, an outfitter to hunt. And what they've done is, like, Raincoast has bought up big territories from these guide and outfitters that have sold them, and so they're not hunting and that. So the wolves are, have the potential of being a lot more protected, because there's going to be less and less people up in there. There's definitely a lot of people during the summertime, like coming into now, where they boat up to Alaska and that. And I suspect there's some of them that are shooting the wolves, but hopefully most of them want to take pictures and not shoot them. Their diet. Well, it's interesting. And Chris Darramont, who's a wolf biologist scientist at UVic, in his talk, so he was one of those 2 scientists that were doing this study along with the Helsuk First Nations member. And what Chris said was, when they were doing their analysis of what they were eating, the islands and that are closer to the mainland, the 80% of that was generally deer that they were eating. As they got further and further towards the Pacific Ocean and the islands that are out on the rim of the Pacific Ocean, it was almost 100% marine based, and that not many deer out there. They're not great swimmers. And if they get out there, some of the islands are smaller, so they're going to be, they're not big enough to be able to reproduce. So it's interesting, the further west that you get, and when you're right out on the rim of the territory, and that's where the marine-based diet is the highest. Now, Parks Canada did some analysis of wolf scat in around the Pacific Rim Park, and they collected about 300 samples. And this is about 10 years ago. And what they found was the largest, the most prevalent animal in the scat at 30% was river otters. And then there was seal pups, a little less than that, raccoons, and then at 20% was deer. And the reason being is because of the massive clear cuts out in the Clayoquot Sound area, and that there was less and less deer. So when the wolves are dispersing, so a wolf will live in its natal pack, the pack it's born into, generally around 2 years to 2 to 3 years. Wolves don't become sexually mature till around 22 months. So for them to then have pups, you know, they generally have to wait, you know, close to 2 years. But where they're when they disperse, they don't disperse if they're on the islands. They don't go eastward towards the mainland and mate with the interior wolves. What they do is they go north-south and they mate with other coastal wolves, you know, a little further north or further south than them. And then that keeps the genetic diversity intact. What else can I say about them? Okay, so hunters aren't as big a problem, you know, because of the remoteness of the area and you know, the fact that there's not many guide and outfitters operating up there. But if you are a BC citizen, you don't need a guide and outfitter. Here's the group that I see as one of the biggest problems, and that with wolves and those coastal wolves. You want to make sure that these wolves do not get habituated and accustomed to human presence. And when you do that, that causes a real problem. And, you know, that was very evident with the Discovery Island wolf just off of BC, off of Victoria. As people went out there and more and more and more, that wolf just lost all its fear of humans. And that's really what they need to have their longevity. 90% of wolf mortality is human caused. And that, so I'm seeing on people's websites and Facebook and that, you know, pictures of them, you know, taking pictures of the coastal wolves, and, you know, they love to do that. But there's a real risk to the wolf. There was a short video called "The Call of the Coastal Wolves," and, you know, these were professional photographers sitting in camouflaged tents that were blinds and that, but the wolves know that they're there. In this book here, there was a TV crew that was from National Geographic, and I think they were doing the documentary for Europe, for Germany, and they spent 3 months filming these wolves, particularly on the beaches and the estuaries. And so they would approach them, you know, presumably by boat. It's the only way to get really in there, and then they would do the filming. Well, when they finished that in about late September, and that the local guide and outfitter from Bella Coola, this is before he sold his territory, he heard about this filming. He knew wolf behavior, that they wouldn't be able to distinguish his boat from the boat from the film crew. And so he went down there and shot them all. And, you know, so here's even before this film would have been edited and produced, the lovely wolves that they were filming were all dead. So by the time they aired it on TV or whatever, they'd have to have a postscript saying, sorry, all these wolves are dead. So I really caution photographers to not habituate them so much. So if you get more and more photographers going in there to do it, or you get a photographer in there that's going to stay there for a long time, it's going to be detrimental to the wolf. So I guess kind of summing up, they're a distinct, different wolf. They're not a new subspecies, but they definitely have different territories, different diets. Their size is different. They disperse north, south, not east. And so they're really quite a unique animal. And I think that's why the interest is there. But I just caution that, if we get too invasive with them, it's going to be to their demise. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking there. You probably heard me enough to pontificate in that. So if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask a question, or if you prefer, you can do it on through the chat, and we can I can answer them as best as possible that way.
I was wondering, are there any researchers here, like at UVic or UBC, studying the genetics instead of it going to UCLA?
Sorry, what was that again?
Oh, if there's any researchers at UVic or UBC studying the genetics, you mentioned it went to UCLA.
Yes.
Are there any researchers here working?
There could have been. I think the reason they sent it to UCLA was just the expertise in terms of being able to do it. I'm not, I'm not as familiar with, like UBC or UVic. They may very well have it, but what was really interesting was finding out just how pure they were. And I'm sure that, a geneticist at UVic or UBC would have, reached the same conclusion.
Thanks.
All right. Good.
I just had a quick one. There has been news stories about wolves coming into first. Sorry, he can't hear me. Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay. There's been wolves coming into First Nations communities on the news. Are those the coastal wolves, or are they the inland?
Well, if like I'm aware of some that have come into a Howsit, which is a First Nation community on Flores Island. Just about, what was it, about a month and a half ago, there was the wolf that was swimming in the in one of the straits up the northern coast of Vancouver Island, and that was close to a First Nations community there. So it's interesting. I talked to a First Nations person from Cayucot, and Cayucot is up on the northern part of the west coast of Vancouver Island. And what he said, his dad said that the wolves would come into the village and they would kill the cats and the dogs. And the cats and the dogs that they were killing were the sick ones. And so the First Nations people, they don't have any veterinary service up there. And why they didn't want to lose a cat or a dog, and that, the wolves were were killing the sick ones. So it in a sense was providing a veterinary service in the sense that you probably would have taken the dog or the cat to the vet to be put down. They were kind of that sick. So they do come into the First Nation villages up on Rivers Inlet, Okino. The wolves will walk through the village, and when that happens, the dogs go underneath the houses, and that when the grizzly bear walks through the village, the res dogs, if I can call them that, or the dogs in the village, they move the grizzly bear along. So they're a lot more concerned about their safety with the wolves, just because there could be 6 or 8 of them and that. So, but the First Nations people are very, very tolerant of them, and they see it as that they share that territory, and that they don't interfere with them, and so that's a very healthy attitude to have.
Definitely. What would be the reason for them wanting to take the sick animals, other than they're easier to pick off? Like, is there?
Yeah. Well, it's that's mainly what it is that they are prey, in that wolves have traditionally targeted domestic animals, and that, but the sick ones, as their normal prey, it's way easier to hunt them than a a healthy animal. And wolves are very opportunistic hunters. They're going to take the easy prey, and that. So when I talked to the First Nations person, they weren't upset about that. They just saw that as a normal behavior pattern of the wolves and their animals. So because I asked them that, I said, well, didn't that bother you or upset you? They said, no, it didn't. So, that's their culture, and that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Gary.
I'm
I was
curious
just
about the
wondering.
territory of
Yep.
the wolves. You mentioned
Oops.
that the territory as far south as Ucluelet, and there is a lot of wolves sighted in Ucluelet, on the beaches and such there. Are they coastal wolves, or is there an overlap in the territory?
Yeah, and I've been out at Ucluelet, and people have mentioned about the prevalence of them. You do get a little bit of overlap between territories, but you got to remember, these are very territorial animals, and for a good reason. They got to protect their territory because that's their prey base. If they let other wolves coming in, and whether it's the marine, for example, let's say a sea lion washed up on one of the beaches around Ucluelet, the dominant wolf pack there is going to make sure that the others don't come in, because that's a huge amount of food for them. So there is some conflict around the periphery of each territory, and they overlap a little bit, but they're not going to go into the the main territory of the wolf. And in fact, here, let me show you something. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that big hole? That's a wolf den. And everybody okay? See that? Yeah. All right. So where you'll find the wolf den is in the middle of the territory, because it's the safest part. And what's quite interesting is many of the wolf dens are near abandoned First Nation villages up and down the coast. That's how close they were with the First Nations people, and that. So yeah, you will get some overlap, but you know, it's there's going to be strife if that's in conflict if they go too far, because they will defend their territory and they generally take no prisoners.
I have
Does that-
another question that's
Mhm.
somewhat unrelated, but I've been on Vancouver Island for about 20 years now, and I was told that years ago they had a wolf cull on the
Yeah.
island. And when they were culling the wolves from the island, what they discovered was, just like any other animal on the island, they seem to be smaller than mainland islands. And when they were culling wolves, they found that it was being repopulated with larger wolves from the mainland. Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, that cull was in the Nimkish Valley, which is you know, from Was up to Port McNeill, the Nimkish Lake. It's a very long north-south lake, and the valley there, and there was lots of wolves. Now there was also a very high percentage of deer up there, but typical, you know, as we've got the present wolf cull for the caribou, you know, it's initiated by hunters. You know, the hunters are saying, well, the wolves, there's too many of them, are taking my deer. Well, you know, that's about, you know, they've been saying that for 150 years. So if we really believe them, there shouldn't be any deer left on, you know, in BC or in that. So, but they did. They culled quite a few wolves, and so that left a vacant territory. And then what happened was, given their swimming ability, and wolves are very, very mobile. You know, some have dispersed from their natal pack up to 800 miles away. There was one wolf in Sayward that was radio collared because they were doing some research in around the same time as the cull, and it was found, and a hunter shot it in the Sioux Hills just outside Victoria. So they are very mobile, and it's easy for them to swim from the mainland onto Vancouver Island there, because there's a number of little islands. They can swim from one island to another and get over to you know, to the northern part of Vancouver Island. They can't swim across the Salish Sea. That's just too far. So those would be interior wolves that were coming down there, and they would know that that was vacant. And that, you know, because that's a very distinct migration. It wasn't sort of, oh, well, let's just go for a swim and see what's over there. But this is the consequences when we have wolf culls. They don't work. All they do is disrupt the whole ecosystem and disrupt, you know, what are stable, you know, wolf territories. If they were killing too many deer, they're gonna impact their prey base. And if they get hungry and there's not enough, they've killed too many, they move on. These are not stupid animals. They're not going to sit there and go, oh, well, you know, the shelves in the grocery store are bare, so I guess we'll just wait around until somebody restocks them. No, they move. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay. I was going to do a talk on the BC wolf cull. I've, you know, been involved in opposing it, writing letters and
Can I
emailing.
ask a
And-
question?
Sorry? So, but I can't post it on the Field Naturalists Facebook group because it's politically how can I put it delicately? It's a political issue, and they, the admins didn't want to have that potential of conflict. So I can't post it. If people are interested in it, I can talk about it. I've done a lot of research into it, and I've written letters and one that I just wrote that looks at the whole history from about 1975 onwards. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, Jennifer has a question. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes,
don't
go ahead,
know.
Jennifer.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. So 2 questions.
Yes.
So you said there was just a few hundred wolves on the island.
There's
But
about
is that a
300
sustainable population? Why are they culling if there's so few? Or is that a lot?
Well, the cull is not on Vancouver Island. There's about 350. You can
Yeah.
hunt wolves on Vancouver Island. You can kill 3 a year. And according to Fish and Wildlife statistics, on average, about 20 are killed each year on Vancouver Island. I mean, it fluctuates, but the average is around 20. So the cull was, in the late 70s and 80s, and then it finished. And then the wolves just repopulate. It happens every time. And that the current BC wolf cull is in the interior of BC in specific areas, trying to protect the mountain caribou and the caribou, whose numbers are so reduced because of the extensive logging that's happened, because that's what they do. They cut down all the trees where the caribou eat the arboreal lichen, which only grows on trees. And, so the biggest predator for caribou is not the wolf, it's the logger. And so they've got certain areas that they're targeting the wolves and shooting them from helicopters. Your tax dollars at work.
They need to cull the loggers. They need to
Yeah.
cull the loggers.
I'm not going to get into that political thing, but yeah, they're scapegoating the wolf, and the reason they're doing it is, as I wrote in this letter, they ignored all the research from scientists saying, look at these caribou herds are in peril. They're plummeting, and yet they just continued to log and log and log. And that's not going to stop now because the BC forest industry is in crisis. And that, so, if they don't log in those areas, that means that mills shut down, which means that those people that work on the mills are out of work, which means it impacts those communities, and they vote. And that, so they're in a desperate situation because they legally have to protect the caribou, but these caribou are on life support, and what's really, really pathetic, and that is they're still continuing to log in the critical habitat of these caribou herds. And the big forest fires that are in the Northeast, like the one that's close to Tumbler Ridge, and the one that's north of Fort St. John, well, that's where the caribou are. And so those forest fires are decimating the habitat of those caribou. Way more than, you know, than a wolf or a few wolves killing that, you know, the caribou. I mean, those trees, look at those trees that are being absolutely you know, burned to crisp. Well, you know, that's their food. All right. Anybody else?
Oh, just one other thing, sorry. I had a bear and a cub out the window a few minutes ago. I was just having a quick look, sorry.
Oh,
Um,
is it a teddy bear?
amazing. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just making a joke. Sorry.
So, do you still have wolves on your property?
Did I have wolves on the property?
You still have them.
Yeah,
Oh, still have them.
yes, that's what I asked.
No,
Yeah.
Tundra was the last one, and I didn't want to get any more because they can outlive you, and that would not have been an ethical thing for me to have done, because you can't rehome them. Okay, you know, if
Yeah, much harder than rehoming your dog, eh?
oh, you know, it
Doesn't
just
work.
doesn't work. I mean, you know, like Tundra was 90% wolf, and the other ones that we had out there were, you know, even higher content. So they're not going to go to another, you know, person and that. So no, we have a 15-month-old male German Shepherd in that, who's actually been quite quiet. Sometimes he gets quite vocal at nighttime. He hears something, and he's head of security around here. So, but he's laying down there. I gave him a bone and a chew, and he's but no, he's chilling out. So anyway, I'm gonna pack it in. Now somebody was recording that.
Yeah,
was
me.
that?
Me,
Oh, you were.
yes,
Oh, thanks, Sal.
yeah, I figured if you couldn't, then I'd try.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Sally, my wife, who's you know, you know, set up the meeting and all the code stuff, and also you know, has admitted people and things of that nature. So it's kind of a family affair here, and that. So anyway, I, you know, thank you for joining. I hope you found it interesting, and you know, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Gary.
you.
That was great. That was really interesting.
Okay.
Thank you
All
for your
right. Well,
time.